like to welcome everybody to our lunch today with Commissioner Adam Putnam. We're in a very nice facility here today, and I would like to take a moment to have Mr. Mo Garavi, the General Manager, come up and say a few words for us.
Thank you, Mick. Just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Good afternoon. And just hope the chef did a great job with the food. He's standing right over there, Chef Darryl Meisel. He's our executive chef at the Sporting News Grill that you're welcome to join us any day you like. So the food is fantastic. The hotel is fantastic. Actually, the good news is that I just heard we got awarded for our service, #2 in the United States and #3 in the world for all the holidays. That's about 4,500 hotels in the world. So I'm extremely excited. It's not what I did, it's actually what the team did and how they, in the last year and a half, 2 years, we got together and we managed to start a hotel and go up there from a service perspective. So please send your clients here. They will be very well taken care of. Please, if you're staying in a hotel, you want a little vacation to get out of work, you know what, please do, come over and we'll be glad to serve you. But again, welcome. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and have a great meeting, and we'll see you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mo. I would like to take a few minutes to introduce some special guests we have here with us today. As I call your name, if you would raise your hand and let us know where you are, and if you would hold your applause till the end, please. Senator Mike Bennett. Representative Jim Boyd. I think we have Pam Nickel here from Representative Ray Pallon's office. Good to see you. Judge Gilbert Smith. We also have with us Manatee County Commissioners Larry Bussell, John Chappie. Commissioner DeSabatino is not here. Michael Galen, Donna Hayes, and Carol Whitmore. Thank you all for being here. I know you have to leave a few minutes late, but thanks for being here with us. Special thanks today to our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Verizon, and our supporting sponsors, Kaiser University and Mosaic. If we could give them a round of applause, please. It is a real pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Commissioner Adam H. Putnam. As Florida's 11th Commissioner of Agriculture, Adam Putnam has committed himself to serving the people of Florida by fostering new employment, stewarding the state's resources, and protecting consumers from those who would prey on them. Commissioner Putnam was sworn in on January 4th, 2011, and serves as the leader of the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, an agency of 13 divisions, 5 offices, and approximately 3,800 employees that work to support the agriculture industry and safeguard consumers in the state of Florida. The Commissioner also serves as a member of Florida's Cabinet alongside Governor Rick Scott, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and Chief Financial Officer Jeff Atwater. Prior to his current role, Commissioner Putnam served 5 terms as Congressman for Florida's 12th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. I can actually say that I attended his first Manatee County Congressional Campaign event at what's now Pier 22. I think that was in 1999 or 2000, something like that. And since then, one of us has been on a meteoric rise. And Adam hasn't done all that badly either. While in Congress, Commissioner Putnam was elected by his colleagues to be chairman of the House Republican Conference, the highest elected leadership position of any Floridian either party is held in Washington. He also served as a member of the House Committees on Government Reform, Rules, Agriculture, and Financial Services. Throughout his congressional career, he was recognized as something we need a lot more of, a leader, on a variety of issues, most notably agriculture, food safety, childhood nutrition, energy, and government efficiency. Before serving in Congress, Commissioner Putnam was elected to the Florida House of Representatives. There he quickly became the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, leading on many issues facing Florida's dynamic agricultural industry, including property rights, water, and the Everglades. A 5th-generation cattle rancher and citrus grower, Commissioner Putnam continues to farm with his family in Polk County, bless their hearts. He is a graduate of the University of Florida with a Bachelor of Science degree in Food and Resource Economics He and his wife, Melissa, have 4 children. So please join me in a warm Manatee County welcome for Commissioner Adam Putnam.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, and gosh, thank you so much for this warm reception, and my compliments and congratulations to the hotel for being the 3rd best in the world. Is that what they said? That's incredible. But I can attest to it because I seldom eat when I'm giving a speech, and 15 people tried to put something in front of me. So they're all about making you go home happy. It's like having an Italian grandmother or something. You need to eat. So it's a great host and a great crowd, and I'm just thrilled to be here. So thank you. And we have come a long way since Dan Miller was gracious enough to host me. If you think I look young now, you should have seen me then. But going to Washington was a privilege to represent the state of Florida. But I'm glad to be home with my soul and my sanity still intact. And today I want to just share a little bit with you about Florida and the position that we're in and the opportunities that we have. And I'm grateful that the Chamber, frankly, recognized the role that agriculture has in the future of our state and invited the Commissioner of Agriculture to be here. It's a broader mission than most people realize, but and it has frankly gotten broader thanks to Jim Boyd's help and Mike Bennett's help and Ray Pilon's help and Greg Stubbe's help as we have come through a very interesting legislative session last year and look forward to one in the coming year. You know, agriculture in Florida, even in the boom years, even when people are just flooding into the state as visitors and as new residents, and new subdivisions are going up on every corner, and the economy's going gangbusters, even then, agriculture is our 2nd largest industry, second only to tourism. It's a $100 billion industry. And when times are tough, as they are now, it is an important stabilizing force for our state. It's not the most glamorous, it's not the most glitzy, but it's critically important and means real jobs, real careers, real support to local government in the form of ad valorem support without really asking for a whole lot in the way of services. And so when you look at Florida's counties, and you start with Manatee and Sarasota, Palm Beach, even Miami-Dade, there are extraordinarily valuable, vibrant agricultural economies in those communities, either east of the interstate on this side of the state or west of the turnpike on the other side of the state. And so changing people's visualization of Florida is important in understanding just how well-rounded our economy is. And when you think about the extraordinary opportunities and natural resources that we have with our beaches and the hospitality and tourism industries, and then the housing and commercial industries that support those, and then in the interior of the state, agriculture and mining and other land-based resources, it has helped give us a balance that would not otherwise have been there when you see a dramatic collapse in tourism and in housing. And so we're darn glad to have it. And a big part of what I try and do as I get around the state is sort of share that message that for most people, agriculture in Florida is quaint and it's charming and bless its little heart. Let's have a living history museum and bring 4th graders through one day a year. And to try and change that mindset about how many local banks it supports, how many kids are supported and put through college as a result of that, how many hundreds of millions of dollars in ad valorem is generated for schools and sheriff substations and sewer lines and things that the citrus grove or the tomato field or the nursery or the sod farm isn't getting a whole lot back in return for in terms of government services. So it's part of that balanced economy that all of us strive for our state. Look, we all know that a high percentage of people who created their wealth in another place, in another state, are going to end up in Florida at some point in their life. We want them 3 or 4 decades sooner. We don't want Florida to solely be a haven for wealth that's been created in Michigan or Ohio or New York or Connecticut. We want people to identify Florida as a place to raise their family, grow their business, relocate their corporate headquarters, build out their farm, all of those things. But what do we have to do to be in that position? And for all of the challenges that Florida faces, for all the frustrations that we have about the condition of our economy, I would still rather be Florida, with Florida's problems and Florida's potential, than any other state. I would not trade places with Michigan or Ohio or New York. Heaven knows I wouldn't trade places with California. When you look out your window and you point west on every afternoon and watch that sunset, and you think about what it's like here in January versus most of the other places in this country, I'd still rather be right here. And so how do we maximize that, particularly at a time when Washington is growing more and more dysfunctional, and competition among and between states will become an even more important determining factor about where growth occurs? Because I believe that in the coming decade and beyond, you will see competition sharpen between the states for economic activity. And that capital will go where it is treated the best. And in the United States, that capital is treated best in the Southeast. You know, our competition really isn't the Midwest. It's not the Rust Belt. It's not the Northeast. It's not even the West Coast. Our competition is Tennessee, Texas, and the Carolinas, and to a lesser extent, Georgia and Alabama. So how do we become competitive not only as a region, but as the most competitive state in the Southeast? And what do we have to deal with as we think about how to position ourselves for those opportunities? The first challenge is water. I believe that water is the single biggest issue facing Florida. Whether you wake up every day and think about how you're going to build more housing or save the Everglades or plant a bigger tomato field, it will boil down to water. No matter what industry or profession you're in, future decisions in Florida will be determined by water. And if you think back not all that long ago to the water wars between Pinellas and Pasco County in the Tampa Bay area, the water wars that frankly are beginning to build right now between Jacksonville and the rural communities outside of Jacksonville, where a lot of Florida's very special springs are. The water war that is simmering right now, where 3 water management districts come together in Orlando. No one wins from a water war. So the conversation about moving water from the interior to the coast is a non-starter. The conversation about moving water from North Florida to South Florida, it's a non-starter. North Florida, they're more accurate shots. I mean, it will lead to a civil war. I mean, Miami may have more guns, but North Florida or have a better aim. It just won't work. So we have to get more and more creative about how we manage the water that we have. You take this last weekend as a perfect example. Before last weekend, Lake Okeechobee was 4 feet lower a week ago than it was the prior year. So a year ago we were in a drought. This year we're in an even worse drought with the lake 4 feet lower than where it was a year prior. Then we get this wonderful rain. 11, 12, 13 inches north of Lake Okeechobee, 6, 8, 9 inches in the lower Everglades. So Florida's water issues are really about timing and distribution. We get the same 55 inches of rain every year, but sometimes it comes 12 inches at a time, and sometimes it comes a quarter of an inch at a time. So thinking creatively about how we use open space to hold that water back, to keep it from flowing to tide and being lost forever, is more ecologically friendly. It is cheaper for taxpayers than it is to build these giant reservoirs that we've constructed throughout South Florida. And it gives landowners, particularly ag landowners, options beyond just, do I do the same thing I've always done in terms of citrus year after year, or tomatoes year after year, or sod year after year. You give landowners options that have a public benefit. So now the options are grow what we've always grown, grow something entirely new that 10 years ago no one even imagined would grow here, like peaches, or 15 years ago, like blueberries. You know, and all of those are homegrown industries. I mean, we talk about economic development in Florida. much of the cutting-edge technology in agriculture, in that $100 billion industry, is developed in the state of Florida. Blueberry royalties have overtaken Gatorade as the #1 revenue producer for the University of Florida. They're making more from royalties on the sale of blueberry bushes than Gatorade. I mean, that's remarkable. People are pushing citrus and planting peaches in Arcadia. That was inconceivable a decade ago. But through new breeding techniques, robust research and development in state universities, you're contributing to the sustainability of a $100 billion industry, even as the state was adding 800 to 1,000 new residents every single day. And it's that kind of innovation that brings balance to Florida's economy. So water quantity, having enough for a growing state that we all hope returns to some sustainable level of growth, maybe somewhere between negative migration, where we are, in the last year or two, and somewhere between negative migration and 1,000 new people a day would be a good thing. And having the water to support their needs and to support those industries is critically important. And then the water quality issues, and making sure that the EPA doesn't single out Florida for a set of federal standards that don't apply to anybody else, which is what they're currently trying to do, and is the biggest job killer I can imagine for our state. And so the Attorney General and I are working very hard to sort of push back on that and say, Florida's got a robust water protection system. Let Floridians, let the DEP and the water management districts, let Florida determine Florida's destiny. Don't take one paragraph of the Clean Water Act and impose it only on our state, which is what the EPA is currently trying to do. And that's bad for everybody. That's bigger than just agriculture. That's bigger than just mining. That's bigger than just landowners. That applies to every single person who gets a water bill at the end of every month. They will be impacted by that. And I'll give you an example. This is this EPA standard. It's called numeric nutrient criteria. And I'm from Bartow, so I'm from Bone Valley. I mean, like the center of the phosphate universe. Grew up fishing in the pits and all of those kinds of things that you do in Polk County. We are blessed with a lot of multi-million-year-old dead dinosaurs that over time have created this extraordinary deposit of phosphate. So as you might expect, our water has higher levels of phosphorus in it than some place that doesn't have the world's largest deposit of phosphate. So you can't make this stuff. This is only the EPA, only DC can come up with this. Under their new proposed rule, if you were to hook a hose to your kitchen sink and fill your drinking glass with it, it would be perfectly fine. It would meet all of their clean drinking water standards. But if you took that same hose out of your drinking glass and ran it out your kitchen window, you would be a polluter. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, people wonder why they're mad at Washington. It's crazy stuff like that. But that water issue and making sure that we have adequate supplies of water for a growing state is a big game changer for Florida as we position ourselves to come out of this recession stronger and more diversified than we went into it. The second piece of that is renewable energy. And this is a tougher issue because managing hype and managing expectations on this is pretty important. This has fundamentally changed just in the last 8 years with new discoveries of natural gas in North America. I don't mind being dependent on the Canadians for natural gas. I do mind being dependent on Venezuela and Iran and Iraq and Libya, but being dependent on the Canadians is a lot better. We can deal with that. But Florida, in Central and South Florida with a year-round growing season, we have the ability to generate a lot of biomass, a lot of plant material that can be used to produce electricity and can be used to produce ethanol that's not from corn. It's not driving up grocery prices. It's not driving up the price of meat. It's not distorting the markets all throughout the Midwest. It is a more efficient way in an unsubsidized world to have renewable sources of electricity and renewable sources of fuel. It's got tremendous potential in South Florida where you can take the interior of our state, areas that are not overly developed from an agricultural standpoint. Maybe it's grazing lands, maybe it's the waste product from citrus or tomatoes or dairy farms, and you actually turn a liability, waste, into something that's profit generating. So it has tremendous potential. And in North Florida, the pine trees, which aren't being sold to build new houses and build studs and trusses and things like that, and aren't being sold for paper and pulp, are actually, as we speak, being used to generate energy. In fact, in a little town called Cottondale, which has a population about half the size of this room, there is a plant that right now, in an unsubsidized way, without government support, private capital, at risk, is converting pine trees into little pellets, 100% of which are being exported to Northern Europe to heat homes. Now, the point of all of that is to say that what is old is new again. And when you talk about economic development and manufacturing and commercial growth and things that bring jobs with them, not just a housing-based industry, but housing plus the jobs that the people who live in those houses need, the land is providing a way forward for us to create jobs in the state of Florida. And from a rural economic development standpoint, it's almost the holy grail. Because when you think about rural economic development, think about this county east of the interstate. How do you really give them the opportunities that they want so that their children can come back from college and find careers there in Palmetto or Ellington or Myakka or Immokalee or LaBelle or any of the areas, Wauchula, Arcadia, all the areas in the interior of the state? How do you provide them economic development opportunities? Well, in Appalachia, in western Kentucky, they would parachute in some new GM plant. And everybody'd be glad to have the jobs, and it'd be wonderful new infrastructure, but the town's never the same. But in Florida, you have an opportunity to build on existing industries, create jobs, create high-wage, high-skilled jobs, and keep the charm that is that interior of our state. So the potential for renewable energy development is a game changer for Florida. On the negative side, a game changer for Florida is the loss of the space program. And that's a different coast, but we all are impacted by that. 4,000 people were laid off the moment the shuttle landed safely. Now, part of that problem is that it took 4,000 people to land the shuttle, and SpaceX and other commercial flight programs can do it with 20. I mean, when you ramp up, we were running a 1960s space program in the 21st century. The shuttle program ran too long. But as a nation, we don't have a vision for replacing it. So now we're hitchhiking with the Russians. And Florida's not the only place where you can launch people into space. So when you talk about economic development and job creation, we've got to find something for that mass of human capital to do so that we don't lose them to Huntsville and we don't lose them to Houston and we don't lose them to Goddard in Maryland, because that's exactly the kind of jobs that we want to bring more of throughout Florida. But it's been particularly harmful to the Space Coast. So that's a game changer for our state. The changes to the Panama Canal, they're widening and deepening it. Anybody that's ever met with your port officials know all about this. It's a mad scramble to prepare for this new day because it is, it's like the construction of the Erie Canal. This is a transformational event in global commerce. It will redirect how goods and services move around the world because all the stuff that we buy from Asia won't have to stop in California on its way to Sarasota or Bradenton, which is what happens now. It will be able to come straight to the east coast of the United States. So the fight is on. Will it stop at Port Manatee? Will it stop at Port Canaveral? Will it stop at the Port of Miami, the Port of Jacksonville, the Port of Tampa? Or will it bypass Florida altogether and go to Savannah or Baltimore or Norfolk or Newark? So Florida is rapidly, with the legislature's focus and attention, positioning itself to be the beneficiary of this once in several lifetimes transformational event in how things move around the world. It's huge. And no matter where in Florida, no matter which seaport is best suited and dredges to the proper depth to take on these enormous new ships, it will change the picture of Florida because of the distribution system, intermodal facilities, ILCs that are under construction now in places like Lake City and Winter Haven and Moore Haven that will push commerce away from the 75, 95 corridors and toward the interior where there's less congestion. So it's a game changer in terms of the development patterns for the interior of our state. So that post-Panamax world, that Panama Canal world, is a game changer for Florida. What happens to Cuba? It's a game changer for Florida. Now, I'm not the first politician who stood up and said, in my lifetime, something's going to happen to Fidel Castro. But I'm feeling on safe ground here, like I might actually be right, that in my lifetime, there will be a change of leadership in Cuba, one way or the other. The question is, how does it go? What does it look like? Who replaces him? You replace a dictator for a tyrant? Do you have a smooth transition? Do you have the kind of transition that we're witnessing in Egypt? How does that work? And what fills that void? What impact does it have on tourism to Florida? If you've been saving up all your life in Iowa or Nebraska to go to some place that's warm and sunny and has great beaches, and you always thought you were going to Florida, but then suddenly Cuba opens up and you think, man, I've seen all those cool James Bond movies. I really need to go there. How does it impact tourism? How does it impact investments in resorts and hotels? What's the capital flight from South Florida? Investments that may have been made here that move there to seize that new wilderness, that new territory that opens up. And what's the humanitarian crisis potentially for our state if it's a destabilized regime and if there's no control over the transition and you have a massive exodus of people in need to our state? And then what does it mean to our ports, to Port Manatee or to the Port of Tampa on the West Coast, where you do have a shorter run to Cuba, assuming that you have an opportunity to do that? And those opportunities, frankly, are growing as we speak. So that's a game changer for Florida. That's not tomorrow, it's not next week, but we don't know that. We don't know. I mean, are we prepared for it? Are we prepared for what, the known unknown, as Rumsfeld would say? How many people still quote Rumsfeld, huh? He's sort of out of vogue a little bit. But that's a game changer for our state. And so the point of all this is that as Florida positions itself to be ready for these rapid transformations in commerce, in technology, as we deal with continued anxiety over the dysfunction in Washington about will they resolve the debt, what will happen to entitlements, how does entitlement reform affect seniors who make up a large portion of our population, how do changes in health care policy impact seniors who make up a large portion of our population and a health care industry that makes up a big part of Florida's GDP, how do all of those things affect us? And positioning Florida as a low-cost, smartly regulated destination for visitors, for young families, and for entrepreneurs, in addition to our traditional supports from retirees and global and domestic tourism, is really the key. And I think that's what you're seeing out of your policymakers in Tallahassee. The most refreshing thing about being out of Washington is being around a group of people in the legislature and on the cabinet, frankly, of both parties, who are interested in solving problems, who see what the problem is and understand what needs to be done to solve it instead of kicking the can down the road. And in Florida, you have a group of leaders who are focused on making Florida the most competitive place in the nation. And that's what you're doing in your business, tightening your belt, finding new ways to squeeze a dime and get 3 nickels and wade through these tough times. And Florida's doing the same thing. Not losing sight of our core mission, making investments in that same higher education system that allows us to remain competitive, making investments in a natural resource system that retains the quality of life that we all enjoy, and preparing our kids in a K-12 system for the day when they're going to be competing, which is here upon us, not just with their crosstown football rivals. We're not talking about, you know, the Manatee Sarasota Friday night showdown, we're talking about graduating with a diploma from one of your high schools and competing against kids in Beijing or Bangalore. I mean, the world is that small, and that's who these graduates are going to be fighting for jobs with. And making sure that we're on the cutting edge of that is critically important. So I'm optimistic about the future of Florida. I feel good about the leadership that we have in place, and I feel good about the natural assets that we have to build and grow on in places like Manatee County that have a diverse economy with extraordinary natural resources on the coast, a robust community life, arts, athletics, investments in kids, opportunities for people to have a well-rounded, enjoyable quality of life, and agriculture, so that we're never in a position of being as dependent on other countries for our food as we are for our fuel, which is unacceptable for a first world country. So thank you for the opportunity to join you, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have any time, but it's a pleasure to be with you.
If you have a question, we have a mic right over here. It's important for you to go to the mic because we are taping this today, and introduce yourself and ask the question. Thank you, Commissioners, for being with us. I'll lead off with a question. Commissioner, I'd like to get your take on the current situation with the relationship between FDEP and the water management districts and kind of the new dynamic that we're feeling with Governor Scott's involvement.
It's a great question. You know, one of the, you know, I talked a lot about water in my remarks, and half of the data about water quality in America is Florida data, because Florida has just been so aggressive over the years about protecting our water. We have 5 water management districts that are arranged along what they call hydrologic boundaries. In other words, they follow watersheds. So if the water all moves towards Charlotte Harbor or Tampa Bay, that's southwest Florida. If the water all moves to the east through the Everglades and out into Biscayne Bay or to Florida Bay, that's South Florida. If it all ends up in the Swanee, that's the Swanee District. It's not political. It's not based on county lines. It really is built around the resource. And that system has served us very well in terms of the protection. The governor and the legislature, recognizing extraordinary budget constraints, began to look at the balance sheets of some of these districts that had hundreds of millions of dollars on them that really weren't going toward the protection of the resource and weren't helping stimulate the economy. And so they've made some pretty significant reforms to those water management districts that heretofore had taxing authority without any real elected accountability and things like that. And so I think the reforms were moves in the right direction. You do want to protect that system, though. I think that the system of 5 different water management districts has served us well. You don't manage the Everglades the way that you would manage the Swanee Valley. They're very different systems with very different needs. One of them's got 5 million people depending on it for drinking water plus industry, and one of them has, you know, probably 500,000 or 1 million people in it at the very most. So you don't want a one-size-fits-all approach to managing water in our state. If you did, it frankly would exacerbate the water wars that are those tensions that are sort of there anyway. So while I think I think the legislature needs to have a close eye on the activities of the water management districts, I don't want to see us get to a point where you have centralized that under the DEP. I don't think DEP would handle that well. I don't think that it would have that local accountability, and I think that it actually would contribute to more water wars instead of managing the tensions between those districts.
Thank you. Commissioner, thank you for being here today. My name is Dieter. I'm with Dieter Sod Service, local company in Bradenton. Just to back up some of the things that you were saying about the sod industry, the agriculture industry, we've been in business for 17 years, and I think there's only a couple of us in here in the sod business. We're just a small company, but in the last 17 years, we've run about $80 million through our bank. We do about 30 million square feet of grass a year, and to confirm what you were saying about the ag, the $100 billion, the sod industry is good for about $36 billion of that. It's a national thing. It's, it's a product that everybody uses, and also the universities need support for the development of the new grasses that you're trying to develop to be more affluent with saltwater usage and so on, contaminated water, and coming up with these products. We're quite involved with the Florida Turfgrass Association, Sod Growers Co-op, to help research some of these ideas and get them out into the public where the public can use them and demonstrate how versatile they are. The second question I have is the Department of Agriculture, in my opinion, is lax in following up on the agricultural bond issues, and the people who have agricultural bonds, who use them improperly, who don't have any agricultural bonds. How can this be tracked down further, and how can it be tightened up? And number two, is there any discussion in the state about the Mexican labor in the state of Florida and where it's heading? Thank you.
Three biggies there. Certainly, like I was, in terms of homegrown industry, higher ed in Florida has continued to keep turfgrass competitive, using less water, more salt tolerant for coastal communities, requires less fertilizer, all those things that are good for everybody. University of Nebraska is not the one that does all that work. It's coming out of the state of Florida through our great university system. So it's an important part of keeping that business alive and thriving. On the bond issue, it's interesting timing on that. As you would expect with the economy tanking, we've had a lot more bond problems than we've ever had in the past throughout industries, not just sod. There's a big one right now in citrus, $5 million bond forfeiture, and the bond covers $100,000. So, I mean, people are just, they're as good as without having had any protection at all. And there's a lot of transient aspects of that where people reopen under a different name, get a different bond, the whole 9 yards. So we're trying to find a way to work through that, and I'd love to hear some suggestions. The challenge there is keeping it priced at such a level that we're not keeping people from entering the industry because we've had a handful of people who've been ripping folks off. So that's kind of the balance. When it comes to immigration, it's an extraordinarily important issue for Florida, for everybody in Florida, not just agriculture. Florida is the capital of the Western Hemisphere. I mean, South Florida is the capital of Latin America. The number of Brazilian tourists the increase in Brazilian tourists almost single-handedly offset the collapse in European tourism to our state. The amount of Venezuelan capital, money, that's moving in here as a safe haven with Chavez down there is saving the condo market in Miami. So when Florida takes a position on immigration, we better be smart about it, because we're not Arizona, and we're darn sure not Alabama, and we don't want to be. I mean, we want to be really smart about this. You have a 10%, 10.5% unemployment rate in our state. You want to make sure that Floridians have access to jobs so that they can support their families. We have a rule of law. We want to reward people who play by the rules, and you want to punish people who don't play by the rules. But in certain sectors of our economy, agriculture, hospitality, tourism, you couldn't find labor at 3% unemployment, and you can't find labor at 10.5% unemployment. They've tried putting prisoners in the fields, and it didn't work. They've tried putting people who are collecting unemployment in the fields. They quit by noon. And so what we have to have as a nation is a smart immigration policy. One, we can't have 50 different immigration policies in this country. And a smart immigration policy looks like this. You've got good border security. I mean, think about what your passport is. It hasn't changed since Gutenberg. My daughter's elementary school library card has more technology in it than your passport. She doesn't even need a librarian. She takes the book to the desk, she opens it up, there's a barcode, she shoots it with the laser gun, she prints her out a receipt, she uses it as a bookmark, and it says, you know, Abby Putnam checked out Llama Llama, Who's Your Mama? And it's due back in 10 days. So we can be smarter about border security than we currently are, using drones and technology and tethered balloons so that we have control of our borders as a society. Then we have to stop kicking out people who graduate from USF with a PhD in nuclear engineering because their student visa has expired, and we find a way to say to them, we would really like you to open your laboratory here in Florida, Mr. PhD in nuclear engineering. We'd really rather you do that here than go back home to Pakistan and open your nuclear laboratory there. Or whatever the case may be. Why do we want to give Google and Microsoft and Intel and everybody else one more reason to go overseas? Let's keep that human capital talent pool here in the United States at both ends of the workforce spectrum. And for the lower end of the workforce spectrum, you want to have a guest worker program that is a tightly defined period of time to do jobs that for whatever reason Americans won't do anymore. We can have a broader social argument about how awful it is that Americans won't do this anymore, but until we fix that, tomatoes still have to be picked, and berries still have to be picked. And if we don't pick them, then we will be as dependent on Honduras, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Mexico for our produce as we are on Venezuela, Iran, Iraq, and Libya for our fuel. That's not really the situation I want our country to be in. So there's a way to do that that is less reflexive, more thoughtful, that makes sure that no one's being exploited, that they're paying taxes, that they have health care so you're not ripping off emergency rooms and you're not ripping off schools, that employers aren't utilizing them or taking advantage of them, and that at the end of that season, they return home. And if they want to come back, then they reapply to come back for a defined period of time again. But having a smart immigration policy is more important for Florida than it is for almost any other state. And the message that we send to the world in a community like this that welcomes Germans and Canadians and a lot of people from other countries who come here, and they want to know that they are welcome here. And you can't say, well, oh, we don't mean you, we mean those other people. It doesn't work like that. You either have a reputation as being a welcoming destination or you don't. And I can think of a handful of states that don't, and I can think of one state that's got a stellar global reputation, and that's Florida, and we need to protect it.
Hi, I'm Ellen Teeter. I'm an acupuncture physician, very interested in health, healthy food. I'm also from Winter Haven. My family was in Citrus for a while there. So thank you for your remarks. They've been very good. In 2006, there was a study done for Sarasota County that showed the average size of farms was about 376 acres, but the median was 15, which means there's a lot of small family farms. That study also showed if 10% of the local food were shifted to be bought local, if food was bought locally, it would put about $80 million in the local economy, provide jobs. So you've talked a lot about big ag. I'd like you to maybe address a little bit supporting the small family farm. There's also the median age of farmers is something like 58 now and rising. We need to be getting young people into helping us grow food, and I think local is more secure. So thank you.
Great point, and certainly didn't mean to overlook it. Just didn't want to spend the whole time just talking about ag. Wanted to sort of go broader, but there's an extraordinary trend in agriculture, well, beyond agriculture right now, this return to the land movement. A lot of it is brought on by renewed interest in where food comes from, how far it travels, how healthy it is. People want to know more about what they're eating, and it's wonderful because those are exactly the right questions to be asking. The biggest growth in agriculture in Florida has been at the small farm level. We're seeing a lot of CSAs springing up around the state. A number of farmers markets continue to multiply. Some are better than others, but they all really reflect this new trend. And I think that a portion of that is a trend, and a portion of that is is really a structural change in how people eat and how people produce their food. In Florida, it has really meant a lot of new revenue opportunities because anytime you can take something like a tomato or a strawberry or citrus and decommoditize it. In other words, if it's in a trailer the size of this room, it's worth almost nothing per piece. But if it's raised in a smaller plot with a relationship, maybe with a restaurant on the beach, then suddenly it goes from being just another tomato to being Ruskin's finest with Plant City strawberries and Haines City blueberries, just like the old Tom McEwen columns that he would open up every sports column with what his breakfast was. Anybody remember that? Then it adds value and it's decommoditized it. And so from a business standpoint, it has made a lot of sense. It has generated a lot of interest in people who are part-time farmers. You know, they're teaching or they're firefighters or policemen on the side, and they have a small plot of land, and they're able to build those relationships. And we've carried that, thanks to the legislature, we've carried this movement to our schools, because it's nuts that in the winter months, which is predominantly when kids are in school, that the state of Florida isn't feeding our kids better than any other state in the country, because nobody else has what we have between October and April. And that's the bulk of the school year. And so because of their leadership, we have transferred the school feeding programs to agriculture that is good for the kids, it's good for society, and that we're developing healthier eating habits that over time are going to help us manage long-term obesity-related illnesses and chronic conditions that cost us a fortune in Medicare, Medicaid type costs. And it's good for local businesses because you're now building that connection. You're building that relationship that Sarasota, Manatee County could build this processing capacity to support some portion of what their schools need 180 days of the year for 2.5 million school children around the state of Florida. So we're the first state whose legislature has made that move, and it only had one no vote. It was amazing. It was like one of the least contentious things that happened last year. It was remarkable because everybody gets that this locally grown movement represents new opportunities not only for healthier eating habits for the kids, but frankly new business opportunities that this chamber can understand.
Yes, sir. My name is Dixie Resnick. I'm 27 years old, and I own a very small nursery that I started myself called Tropico. I'm actually from that scenario that you mentioned in Kentucky. I was born and raised there, and I went to the University of Kentucky, and I got a degree in natural resource conservation and management. As soon as I graduated, I moved to Florida with the intentions of exactly what you're talking about. I saw a ton of potential. But as I worked my way up the ladder professionally, the economy started going down. My last position that I held, as far as my degree goes, was coastal research, and I also did water quality management. And when my position was eliminated and when my grant ran out, I decided to start my own business. My question for you is, as she had mentioned before, the age of professional farmers and nurseries, the big guys, the guys that little guys like me compete against, is much older. And that's because the resources are not there for us. I literally collected and planted seeds to start. My question to you is, what advice would you give my generation if we're wanting to seize this opportunity that you say we have? What is a good idea for us even getting into the business, and what's the motivation? Because it's extremely hard. That's all I have.
It is extremely hard. You're absolutely right. As the youngest of four from an ag family, I mean, it's incredibly hard. And to support families for full-time agriculture, you've got to have a certain size, and it's very difficult. The good news is, much to the chagrin of my banker, realtor, home builder friends who are in the room, there's never been a better time in the state of Florida to buy land and go into agriculture. I mean, when you look at record low land prices in Florida, the barriers to entry are as low as they've ever been for that purpose. In fact, they're on par with Midwestern agricultural land prices. And so going to the interior of the state, say on the other side of the interstate or the turnpike, talking about the other coast, there really are opportunities for young people, and we're seeing a revival in younger brothers and sisters who didn't think that they would ever be able to add to the family farm, or entirely new entrants to agriculture and ornamental horticulture who are moving into that. The challenges are the same as any other small business. Access to lending is very difficult. A lot of banks stay away from ag loans. So, there's farm credit for things like that. Community banks sometimes are more willing than the bigger banks. The regional and national banks have basically closed the door on ag loans. But for young people going into agriculture, there are actually specific programs to help facilitate that, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that. But from the standpoint of barriers to entry, right now in the state of Florida, it actually, in a counter-cyclical sort of way, is a great time to be going into it. If you got the desire to stick it out, because it's not easy, as you know. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Great comments, and I think one of the things that I would like to recognize about the Manatee Chamber is that it's always recognized agriculture as part of the value-added economy, and does a terrific job in I think, practicing what it preaches about the balanced need for economic development in Manatee County and Southwest Florida. Just a couple of quick announcements. I would like to remind you of our Pancake and Politics. That's December 1st at 7:30 at the Bradenton Country Club. It's a legislative session preview, so please mark that on your calendar. And also on October 11th, the golf tournament at Bradenton, 21st? 21st. I've got it now. The golf tournament, a week from Friday. It's a great tournament. So check with Marie, check in with the chamber. There's probably some information outside to grab on that. Thank you all for being here. It's been a great session. Have a great day.